Hi, my name is Elena Whitfield. Maybe you've heard, I was once a ballerina who had everything until I lost it all in a brutal divorce. But that night, in front of hundreds of eyes, my ex husband lunged at me, hand raised to strike, when Julian, the only man brave enough to stand by me, caught his wrist inches from my face and said, "Touch her, and I'll destroy you." The room went silent, and in that moment, my life changed forever. Before I share the rest of my story, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rise from the ashes. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I stood at the edge of the Coleman Estate's grand ballroom. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Ashley River glittered like scattered diamonds under the Charleston moon. I shouldn't have come. Every instinct had screamed at me to stay home. But pride, that stubborn, foolish pride, had dressed me in my only remaining designer gown and driven me here. "Elena Whitfield," a voice purred behind me. "I didn't expect to see you at a Coleman event." I turned to face Margaret Beaumont, one of Charleston's most vicious social chroniclers. Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. "The Literacy Foundation is a cause I support," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Some things are more important than personal history." She laughed, a tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. How noble, though I imagine it must be difficult, seeing Richard so successful. As if summoned by her words, my ex-husband's voice boomed across the room. Richard Coleman stood at the center of a circle of admirers. His new girlfriend, a sleek brunette half his age, draped on his arm like an expensive accessory. His eyes found mine across the crowd, and something cruel flickered in them. "Speaking of success," he called out, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Elena, is that you? My God, I almost didn't recognize you. The years haven't been kind, have they?" The crowd turned to stare. Heat rushed to my face as Richard continued, each word a calculated strike. "You know, gentlemen, they say divorce is expensive because it's worth it. Looking at Elena now, I'd say I got a bargain." The laughter that followed felt like shards of glass against my skin. From prima ballerina to public school teacher. Though I suppose those who can't do, teach, right? My hand instinctively moved to my stomach, a protective gesture I caught too late. No one here knew my secret. No one could know. Not about the life growing inside me. Not about the man who'd given me this unexpected gift. In a moment of desperate tenderness. "Richard," I said, forcing my voice to remain level, "how thoughtful of you to take such interest in my career. Though I find teaching far more rewarding than being anyone's trophy wife." His face darkened. The brunette on his arm giggled nervously. "Trophy?" Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping to a stage whisper everyone could still hear. "Darling, trophies are supposed to maintain their shine. You've rather let yourself go." I stood there, drowning in the weight of their stares and whispers. The designer gown, a remnant from my old life, suddenly felt too tight. Too obvious in its attempt to reclaim something lost. The chandeliers above blurred as tears threatened, but I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "Excuse me," I murmured, setting down my untouched champagne. "I need some air." I fled through the French doors onto the terrace, my heels clicking against the stone. The cool November air hit my burning cheeks as I gripped the balustrade, knuckles white. "Don't," I whispered to myself, hand pressed against my still flat belly. "Don't let him win, not tonight." But the damage was done. Tomorrow, Charleston society would feast on the story of how Richard Coleman had publicly destroyed his pathetic ex-wife. Again. Inside, the party continued, laughter and music floating out into the night. I remained on the terrace, a ghost at the edges of a life I'd once inhabited. The moon reflected on the water, and I wondered how I'd fallen so far, so fast. From the stages of New York to this moment of utter humiliation. "You're stronger than this," I told my reflection in the dark window. But even I didn't believe it anymore. That night, I drove home to my small apartment in North Charleston. A far cry from the historic mansion Richard and I had shared south of Broad. Sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the only photo I'd kept from my performing days. Me in white tulle, mid-leap, frozen in a moment of perfect grace. How had that girl become this woman? It started as a fairy tale, the way these stories always do. I was 22, fresh from the American Ballet Theater, my whole life stretching before me like an endless stage. Richard Coleman swept into my life at a charity gala. Ironically, not unlike tonight's event. He was handsome, established, from one of Charleston's oldest families. When he looked at me, I felt seen in a way that transcended the stage lights. "You're magnificent," he'd said after watching me perform Giselle. Like something out of a dream. I should have recognized the warning in those words. Richard didn't fall in love with me. He fell in love with an idea, a beautiful thing to possess and display. The early years sparkled with promise. I joined the Charleston Ballet as principal choreographer, creating pieces that earned national recognition. Richard played the supportive husband in public, boasting about his brilliant wife at country club dinners and charity galas. But at home, the mask slipped. "Do you have to travel to New York again?" he'd ask when opportunities arose. "Charleston society needs you here. I need you here." Slowly, incrementally, my world shrank. I turned down guest performances, declined teaching positions at prestigious schools. Richard framed it as romance. "I can't bear to be apart from you." But chains dressed in silk are still chains. The affair started in our 5th year. First, his secretary. Such a cliche, I almost laughed when I found them. Then the interior designer renovating our guest house. Then the law intern, barely older than my ballet students. "You've let yourself go," he said when I confronted him, though I was still the same size I'd been on our wedding day. "You're always tired, always talking about dance. When did you become so boring?" The divorce was surgical in its cruelty. Richard's family lawyers, the best in the Southeast, painted me as a gold digger who'd trapped their golden son. Never mind that I'd given up my career for him. Never mind that every sacrifice had been mine. I lost everything. The house, the savings, even my position at the ballet company. Richard's family were major donors, after all. Charleston society closed ranks, and I became persona non grata overnight, the girl who'd flown too close to the sun. "You'll be fine," my lawyer had said, sliding the papers across his desk. "You're young. You'll rebuild." But I was 32, too old to return to performing, too tainted by scandal to find another position in Charleston's insular arts community. So I took the only job I could find, teaching movement and dance at a public school in a forgotten corner of the city. The whiskey burned as I poured myself a second glass. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. This was my life now. A 1-bedroom apartment, a 12-year-old Honda, and a job that barely covered rent. And then Julian had happened. It was 6 weeks ago, at a gallery opening I'd attended only because my friend Chloe dragged me there. Julian Hartman, tech investor from Boston, widowed, with eyes that held their own sorrows. We talked about loss, about starting over, about the peculiar grief of becoming someone you don't recognize. One night, that's all it was supposed to be. A moment of feeling desired again, of remembering my body could be more than just a source of shame. Julian was gentle, present, in a way Richard had never been. When he traced the faint scars on my feet from years on point, he called them beautiful. He left for Singapore the next morning. "A business deal," he'd said, kissing my forehead in the pre-dawn darkness. "I'll call you when I get back." He hadn't called. And 2 weeks later, the test showed 2 pink lines. Now, sitting in my kitchen with the ghost of tonight's humiliation still fresh, I placed my hand over my stomach again. This secret, this terrifying, wonderful secret, was mine alone. Julian didn't know. Richard couldn't know. Charleston would devour me whole if they knew. But in the quiet of my apartment, away from judging eyes and cruel laughter, I allowed myself one moment of pure, fierce love for the tiny life growing inside me. This child would be my redemption, my second chance, even if I had to do it alone, especially if I had to do it alone. The next morning brought the inevitable. My phone buzzed with texts, each one a fresh wound. "Saw what happened last night. So sorry, hun." Richard was out of line, but maybe it's time to consider moving somewhere fresh? I deleted them all without responding. In the bathroom mirror, I examined myself with cruel honesty. Richard wasn't entirely wrong. The stress of the past 2 years had aged me. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and I'd gained weight, though now I knew at least part of that was the baby. At school, I threw myself into teaching with desperate energy. My students, mostly kids from low-income families who'd never seen a ballet, were my salvation. They didn't know about my fall from grace. To them, I was just Ms. Whitfield, the teacher who played music during math and let them dance out their feelings during break. Ms. W. called out Destiny, a fierce 11-year-old with natural rhythm. You gonna show us that spin thing again? I demonstrated a simple pirouette, muscle memory taking over. For a moment, I forgot everything else. That afternoon, I had a shift at Brushstrokes, a small art gallery in the French Quarter. The owner, Marcus, was one of the few people in Charleston who hadn't turned their back on me after the divorce. The work was quiet, mostly cataloging pieces and occasionally guiding tourists through exhibitions. I was adjusting a landscape painting when the bell above the door chimed. My heart stopped. Julian Hartman stood in the doorway, looking exactly as I remembered. Tall, lean, with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. His green eyes found mine immediately. Elena, he said, and my name on his lips was almost my undoing. Julian. I gripped the painting's frame to steady myself. I didn't know you were back in town. Just arrived yesterday. He paused, seeming to wrestle with words. I'm sorry I didn't call. The Singapore deal became complicated. And then Helen, he trailed off. Helen, his late wife. I understood without explanation. Grief wasn't linear. Sometimes it ambushed you in foreign hotel rooms or familiar streets. You don't owe me an explanation, I said, meaning it. We both knew what that night was. He stepped closer, and I caught his scent. Cedar and something clean, like rain. Did we? Because I haven't stopped thinking about you. My hand moved involuntarily toward my stomach before I caught myself. But Julian was perceptive. His eyes followed the gesture, a question forming. Elena, are you looking at this piece? I interrupted, gesturing desperately at the landscape. It's a beautiful example of low-country impressionism. The artist captures the marshlight perfectly. Julian studied me for a long moment, then played along. It's stunning. Actually, I'm here about the exhibition opening next month. I'm one of the anonymous sponsors. Of course he was, because the universe seemed determined to tangle our paths. We spent the next hour discussing art, carefully avoiding anything personal. But awareness hummed between us, electric and dangerous. When he finally left, promising to return for the opening, I locked the gallery door and slid to the floor. How could I tell him? How could I not? That evening, I met Chloe at a wine bar. She drank. I nursed a seltzer with lime. Spill, she commanded, her lawyer instincts sharp as ever. You look like you've seen a ghost. Richard destroyed me at the Coleman Gala last night, I said, deflecting. Richard's an ass. What else is new? She leaned forward. There's something else. Come on, E. We've been friends since college. I wanted so badly to tell her. About the baby. About Julian. About the impossible tangle of my life. But the words wouldn't come. I'm just tired, I said finally. Tired of being Charleston's favorite cautionary tale. Chloe reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You know what? Screw them all. You're worth 10 of those society vultures. Later, alone in my apartment, I stood at the window watching the city lights. Tomorrow, I'd call my doctor, start prenatal vitamins, begin planning for a future that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. We're going to be okay, I whispered to my belly. I don't know how, but we're going to be okay. In the distance, a church bell tolled midnight. Another day survived. Another day closer to whoever I was becoming. 2 weeks later, the harassment began. It started small. Anonymous messages on social media calling me a bitter ex-wife and washed-up has-been. I blocked the accounts, but new ones appeared like weeds. Then came the emails to my school principal, suggesting I was unstable and inappropriate around children. Elena, Principal Morrison called me into her office on a gray Tuesday. I need you to know I don't believe a word of this garbage, but I have to ask, is there anything going on I should know about? My morning sickness had been brutal that day. I'd barely made it through a first period without running to the bathroom. No, I lied. It's just my ex-husband's way of continuing to punish me for existing. She nodded sympathetically. Take the rest of the day. Get some rest. Document everything. We might need to involve the police. But that evening, the stakes escalated. A manila envelope waited at my apartment door. No postage or address. Inside, a grainy photo of me leaving the reproductive health clinic, where I'd gone for my first prenatal appointment. The note was typed, "Charleston's fallen princess has a secret. How much is silence worth?" My hands shook as I called Chloe. "Pack a bag," she said immediately. "You're staying with me tonight." But I couldn't run. Running meant they'd won. Richard, his society friends, whoever was behind this campaign of terror. Instead, I did something unexpected. I went to my dance studio at school and turned on the music. For 2 hours, I danced. Not the perfect, controlled movements of my ballet days, but something raw and primal. I danced my fear, my rage, my fierce determination to protect the life inside me. When I finally collapsed, sweaty and exhausted, I felt clearer than I had in weeks. The next morning brought a new twist. Julian appeared at the gallery with a folder of legal documents. "We need to talk," he said, his face grave. "About your ex-husband." Julian, I don't... Please. He spread the papers on the counter. My company was approached about acquiring some of Coleman Industries' tech patents. During due diligence, we discovered some interesting irregularities. I stared at the financial documents, not understanding most of it. What does this mean? It means Richard Coleman has been keeping his company afloat with loans from some very dangerous people in Atlanta. The Serrano family, specifically. The Serranos, even I knew that name. Old money with rumored ties to organized crime. The kind of family that operated in shadows and whispers. Why are you telling me this? Julian met my eyes. Because if this information became public, it would destroy him. And because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because I care what happens to you. More than I should. The baby fluttered inside me. The first movement I'd felt. A butterfly of life. Reminding me of all I had to protect. "Julian, there's something..." The gallery door burst open. Richard stormed in, his face twisted with fury. "You manipulative bitch," he snarled. "I know what you're doing." Julian stepped between us. "Mr. Coleman, I suggest you leave. And I suggest you mind your own business, Hartman." Richard's eyes were wild. "This is between me and my ex-wife. The pathetic creature who's been spreading lies about my company." "I haven't said anything to anyone," I protested. "No? Then explain why I'm getting calls about federal investigations. Why my investors are pulling out." He advanced despite Julian's protective stance. "You always were vindictive, Elena. Could never accept that I traded up." "Traded up?" The words erupted from somewhere deep. "You mean to children? Your girlfriend is 23, Richard. She's younger than some of my students." His hand moved so fast I didn't see it coming, but Julian did. He caught Richard's wrist inches from my face. "Touch her," Julian said quietly, "and I'll destroy you myself. No financial investigations needed." Richard wrenched free, adjusting his cuff. "This isn't over?" he hissed. "I know you're hiding something, Elena, and when I find out what it is..." He left the threat hanging, storming out as dramatically as he'd entered. Julian immediately turned to me, checking my face, my arms. "Are you okay? Has he done this before?" "Not physically," I admitted, then felt the baby move again, stronger this time. A swimmer in secret seas, demanding attention. "Elena," Julian said softly, "what aren't you telling me?" I looked into his green eyes and made a choice. Not the full truth, not yet, but a piece of it. "I'm being blackmailed," I said. "Someone knows something about me, and they're threatening to expose it." "What do they know?" I shook my head. "I can't, not yet. But Julian, be careful. Being near me right now is dangerous." He cupped my face gently. "I'm not afraid of Richard Coleman." "Maybe you should be," I whispered. That night, I lay in bed, feeling the baby's movements. Each flutter a reminder of how much I had to lose. Richard was escalating. The blackmailer was closing in. And Julian, kind, protective Julian, was walking into a storm he didn't even know existed. "Hold on, little one," I murmured. "Mama's going to figure this out." Somehow, something shifted in me after Richard's threat. The woman who'd cowered at the charity gala was gone, replaced by someone I was still learning to recognize. A mother, a fighter, a survivor. I started with small acts of reclamation. First, I returned to teaching with renewed purpose. My students needed someone who believed in them, and I found that in lifting them up, I was lifting myself. "Ms. W., you different lately," Destiny observed during our after-school dance program. like you got your fight back. Maybe I have, I said, watching her perfect a combination we'd been working on. Maybe we all need to find our fight sometimes. The dance program was my initiative. 2 hours after school, where kids could learn movement, expression, and discipline. No funding, of course. I paid for the speakers and mats myself. But watching these children discover their bodies could create beauty. That was worth every penny I scraped together. Word spread. Soon I had 20 kids, then 30. Parents started stopping by to watch, tears in their eyes as their children transformed from awkward adolescents into confident performers. You should film this, suggested Maria, a single mom whose son had gone from failing grades to honor roll since joining the program. Show people what you're doing here. That night, I set up my phone and recorded the kids dancing. No fancy equipment, no professional lighting, just pure joy and motion. I posted it on the school's social media page with a simple caption, "Every child deserves to dance." By morning, it had 1,000 views. By the end of the week, 10,000. Chloe called, laughing. "Girl, you've gone viral. Local news wants to interview you." "No," I said automatically, then caught myself. Why was I hiding? Actually, yes, set it up. The interview was scheduled for Friday. Thursday night, Julian appeared at my apartment with Chinese takeout and a proposition. "I want to fund your program," he said without preamble. "Properly fund it. New studio space, equipment, maybe even scholarships for summer intensives." I stared at him over my container of lo mein, the only thing that didn't trigger morning sickness. "Julian, you can't just..." "Yes, I can." He leaned forward. "Elena, I've watched you transform these kids. You're not just teaching them dance. You're teaching them to believe in themselves. That's worth investing in. People will talk. They'll say, let them talk." His voice was fierce. When has Charleston's gossip ever been worth more than doing what's right? I set down my food, my hand drifting to my belly. 3 months now, starting to show despite the loose clothing I'd adopted. Soon, there'd be no hiding it. "There's more," Julian continued. "I want to establish a proper foundation. The Hartman Whitfield Foundation for Arts Education. You'd run it. Full salary, benefits." "Stop." The word came out sharper than intended. "Just stop." He looked hurt. "I'm trying to help." "I know." I stood, pacing to the window. "But I can't be someone else's project again. I can't be saved by another wealthy man, no matter how good his intentions." "That's not what this is." "Isn't it?" I turned to face him. "Julian, you're kind and generous and everything Richard wasn't. But I need to stand on my own feet. I need to know I can survive without me." The words hung between us, heavy with unspoken truths. The baby fluttered, as if sensing the tension. Julian stood slowly. "I understand. But Elena, the offer stands. Not as charity, not as salvation, as a business partnership. Think about it." After he left, I sat in the darkness, wrestling with pride and practicality. The baby needed security. The kids deserved better than borrowed speakers and donated mats. But could I accept help without losing myself again? Friday's interview changed everything. The reporter, a young woman named Ashley, arrived expecting a feel-good fluff piece. Instead, she found a story about redemption, about creating beauty from ashes. "Tell me about your journey," she said as the cameras rolled. So I did. Not everything. The baby remained my secret. But enough. I talked about loss and rebuilding, about finding purpose in unexpected places. When she asked about the viral video, I called the kids over. "These are my teachers," I said. "They show me every day that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about dancing anyway." Destiny grabbed my hand. "Ms. W saved us," she announced to the camera. But really, we saving each other. The segment aired that night. By Saturday morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Donors wanting to contribute, parents asking about enrollment, 3 private schools offering me positions, and one call that made my blood freeze. "Enjoying your 15 minutes?" Richard's voice slithered through the phone. "Because I know what you're hiding, Elena. And when Charleston finds out their new hero is pregnant with another man's bastard, well, let's see how inspirational you are then." The line went dead. I sat on my bathroom floor, nausea rolling through me that had nothing to do with morning sickness. He knew. Of course he knew. Richard had eyes everywhere in this city. But as I sat there, something destiny said echoed in my mind. We saving each other. Maybe that was the answer. Not standing alone, not being saved, but something in between. A community, a foundation built on mutual support rather than dependence. I picked up my phone and dialed Julian's number. I want to discuss the foundation, I said when he answered, but as equal partners. My vision, your resources. 50-50. Done, he said immediately. When do we start? Monday. But Julian, there's something else I need to tell you. Can you come over? I'm already in my car. 20 minutes. 20 minutes to figure out how to tell him about our child. 20 minutes to change everything. Julian sat across from me, waiting. Patient, kind, everything I didn't deserve. I'm pregnant, I said, the words falling like stones into still water. 14 weeks. It's yours. His face went through a symphony of emotions. Shock, confusion, something that might have been joy before settling into hurt. 14 weeks, he repeated slowly. You've known for 2 months. I couldn't meet his eyes. I wanted to tell you. That day at the gallery, when Richard, 2 months, Elena. He stood, running his hands through his hair. I've seen you almost every day. We've talked about the foundation, about the future, and you never, how could I? The words burst out. Hey, remember that one night we spent together? Surprise, you're going to be a father again. After losing Helen, after everything you've been through, that wasn't your choice to make. His voice was quiet, controlled, but I could see the storm beneath. You took away my right to... He stopped, took a breath. Is this why you initially refused the foundation? You thought I'd only help because of the baby? Wouldn't you have? I don't know. The admission seemed to surprise him, but I deserved the chance to find out. We sat in silence, the weight of secrets finally spoken crushing the air between us. Then Julian did something unexpected. He knelt beside my chair, his hand hovering near my stomach. May I? I nodded, tears streaming. His palm settled gently over where our child grew. Helen and I tried for years, he whispered. When she died, I thought that dream died too. I'm sorry, I sobbed, for not telling you, for Richard knowing before you, for being such a mess. Shh, he pulled me into his arms. We'll figure it out, but Elena, no more secrets. Promise me. I promise. We stayed like that until my tears dried. Then, being Julian, he shifted into planning mode. Doctors, security, dealing with Richard's threats, but I stopped him. There's an event tomorrow night, the Charleston Arts Gala. I'm going, he frowned. Elena, if Richard's threatening to expose, then I'll beat him to it. The decision crystallized as I spoke. I'm tired of hiding, Julian. Tired of being afraid. If Charleston wants to judge me, let them do it to my face. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I stood, new steel in my spine. That viral video, the interview, they're calling me inspirational. Well, let's see if they still think that when they know the whole truth. Julian studied me, then smiled. The first real smile since my confession. Then we go together. Julian, no. Your reputation is my concern. Elena, I'm not Richard. I don't care what Charleston society thinks. I care what you think. What our child thinks. Our child. The words wrapped around me like armor. The next night, I stood before my mirror in a dress that no longer hid what I'd been concealing. The deep burgundy fabric draped over my visible bump, elegant and unapologetic. My phone buzzed with texts from Chloe. Turn on Channel 5. Now. Richard had given an interview. On the screen, he sat in his office, every inch the wounded ex-husband. I wish Elena the best, he said with practiced sincerity. It's been hard, watching her struggles since our divorce. The delusions, the desperate attempts for attention. Now she's claiming to be pregnant, refusing to name the father. It's clearly a cry for help. You bastard, I whispered. But he wasn't done. I've tried to help, of course, but she's become erratic, even dangerous. I fear for the students she teaches. Mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of. But when it affects children, I turned it off, hands shaking. He'd fired the first shot, painting me as unstable, delusional. By tomorrow, parents would be calling for my resignation. Ready? Julian appeared in my doorway, devastating in his tuxedo. Did you see? I saw. His jaw was tight. Which is why I made some calls. The Serranos aren't happy about certain financial documents surfacing. Richard might find he has bigger problems than his ex-wife's pregnancy. Julian, what did you do? Nothing illegal, just ensured certain information reached interested parties. He offered his arm. Shall we? The gala was held at the Gibbs Museum, all marble and crystal and old Charleston money. We entered together, my hand on Julian's arm, chin high, despite the whispers that followed our wake. Is that Elena Whitfield? Look at her stomach. Julian Hartman? With her? I found my spot near the silent auction tables, pretending to study the lots while the room buzzed around us. Then Richard arrived. He strode straight toward us, his date forgotten, face twisted with rage. The crowd parted, sensing drama. You think you're clever? He hissed. Spreading lies about my company? I haven't spread anything, I said calmly. Though it's interesting you'd come to me. Guilty conscience? You're delusional. He raised his voice, playing to the crowd. Just like I told Channel 5. Everyone, look at her. Pregnant, unwed, clinging to any who'll have her. Actually, Julian interjected smoothly, she's pregnant with my child, and I couldn't be more thrilled. The room exploded in gasps and whispers. Richard's face went purple. You're lying. She's lying. This is all some scheme. Mr. Coleman. A new voice cut through. FBI agent Sarah Martinez, whom I recognized from the morning news. We need to speak with you about your financial records. Outside, please. The color drained from Richard's face. This is a setup, Elena. You vindictive. Mr. Coleman. Now. As they led him out, he shot me a look of pure hatred. But I didn't flinch. Not anymore. The room remained frozen, all eyes on me. This was my moment. I stepped onto the small stage where the auction announcer stood, taking the microphone before anyone could stop me. Good evening, Charleston. My voice rang clear. Since my personal life seems to be such a source of fascination, let me clarify a few things. The crowd held its breath. Yes, I'm pregnant. Yes, Julian Hartman is the father. No, we're not married. I paused, meeting the eyes of every gossip who delighted in my downfall. I'm also starting a foundation to provide arts education to underprivileged children. Because unlike some people in this room, I believe in building up rather than tearing down. I was born here, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I've watched this city celebrate my successes and savor my failures. You've seen me at my highest and my lowest. But here's what you haven't seen. Me giving up. I found Destiny and her mother in the crowd. They'd come as my guests, dressed in their finest. These children, I gestured to them, taught me that grace isn't about perfect form or old money or the right last name. It's about getting up every time you fall. It's about dancing, even when the music stops. So yes, I'm pregnant. Unwed, imperfect, human. I placed my hand on my belly. And I'm raising this child to know that their worth isn't determined by whispers at galas or their parents' marital status. I set down the microphone and walked off the stage. The silence was deafening. Then, from the back of the room, applause. Destiny's mother, tears streaming, clapping alone. Then another joined. Then another. Not everyone. Maybe not even most, but enough. Enough to know I'd won something more valuable than Charleston's approval. I'd won my self-respect. The next 48 hours were a hurricane. Richard's arrest made national news. The FBI investigation revealed a web of financial crimes that went deeper than anyone imagined. The Serrano family's involvement sent shockwaves through Charleston's elite. Several prominent families found themselves under scrutiny. My phone rang nonstop. Reporters wanted statements. Parents called about the dance program. Some supportive, others concerned. The school board scheduled an emergency meeting. They can't fire you, Chloe assured me over breakfast. You've done nothing wrong. Since when has that mattered? I pushed eggs around my plate. Morning sickness still fierce at 4 months. Richard painted me as unstable. Half the city thinks I'm having delusions. The other half thinks you're a hero. She showed me her tablet. Look at these comments. The video from the gala had gone viral. Not my speech, but what happened after. Someone had filmed Julian taking my hand as we left. The protective way he guided me through the crowd, his fierce defense against reporters. Charleston's real Cinderella story, one headline read. From ballet to blackmail. Elena Whitfield's courage, read another. But for every supportive article, there was vitriol. Comments calling me a gold digger, a homewrecker, a disgrace. Photos from my ballet days circulated with cruel captions about my weight gain. Don't read those, Julian said, confiscating the tablet. He'd practically moved in since the gala, protective to the point of hovering. None of it matters. It matters when parents pull their kids from my program. It matters when the school board, the doorbell interrupted. Julian checked the security camera, frowning. Were you expecting someone? Before I could answer, he opened the door. A woman stood there, elegant, silver-haired, with Julian's green eyes. Mother? Julian's shock was evident. What are you doing here? Eleanor Hartman swept in like she owned the place. Her gaze found me immediately, taking in my bump, my messy hair, the modest apartment. So, she said coolly, you're the woman carrying my grandchild. Mother, Julian, darling, give us a moment. It wasn't a request. Ms. Whitfield and I need to talk. Julian looked at me, questioning. I nodded, though my heart hammered. When he left, Eleanor settled into my second-hand armchair with practiced grace. Helen was my daughter-in-law for 15 years. She began without preamble. I held her hand through 6 miscarriages. Watched my son die a little more each time. Mrs. Hartman, when she passed, I thought Julian would follow. He loved her that completely. Her eyes, so like his, studied me. Then he called last week, happier than I'd heard in years, because of you. I know exactly what you meant, and didn't mean. She leaned forward. The question is, what do you intend now? I intend to raise this child, to continue teaching, to build something good from something complicated. Without my son, the question hung between us. That's his choice, I said finally. I won't trap him with obligation, not after what he's lost. Eleanor's expression shifted, something like approval flickering across her features. Helen trapped him, she said quietly. Oh, not intentionally, but with her grief, her desperation for a child. He couldn't leave, couldn't breathe, couldn't mourn his own losses because he was so busy carrying hers. This wasn't what I'd expected. Why are you telling me this? Because you're not Helen. She stood, smoothing her skirt. You're not asking him to save you. That terrifies him more than your past or Charleston's gossip ever could. She moved to the door, then paused. The baby, do you know? A girl, I said softly. A daughter. Eleanor's composure cracked, tears glittering. Helen would have been so happy for him. For you both. After she left, I sat in stunned silence until Julian returned. What did she say? He asked anxiously. That I'm not Helen. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He crossed to me, kneeling again, a habit he'd developed, speaking to the baby. She's right, he said to my belly. Your mama's nothing like anyone I've known. Stubborn, proud, impossibly brave. He looked up at me. I'm not trying to save you, Elena. I'm trying to deserve you. Julian, no, let me finish. He pulled out a small velvet box, and my heart stopped. This isn't what you think. Open it. Inside lay a key. It's to the studio space on King Street, the one you've walked past 100 times, pressing your face to the window. He smiled at my shock. It's yours, not ours, yours. The Whitfield Academy of Dance. I can't accept. It's not a gift. It's an investment. In you, in those kids, in our daughter who'll grow up watching her mother change lives. He closed my fingers around the key. Partners, remember? This is my contribution. Everything else, the vision, the work, the magic, that's all you. I stared at the key, tears blurring my vision. How do you know I won't fail? Because I've watched you rise from ashes before. Because those kids believe in you. Because our daughter chose you to be her mother. He cupped my face. Because you're Elena Whitfield, and you don't know how to give up. That night, as news of Richard's expanded charges dominated the headlines, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, I stood in my new studio space. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating empty floors that would soon echo with children's laughter. Julian wrapped his arms around me from behind, our reflections ghost-like in the mirrors. What are you thinking? He asked. That 6 months ago, I wanted to disappear. I thought my story was over. I leaned into his warmth, but maybe it was just intermission. And now, I turned in his arms, my bump between us, our daughter safe and protected. Now, the second act begins. Outside, Charleston slept, some plotting my downfall, others planning support. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more judgment, more fights to face. But tonight, in this space of infinite possibility, I finally felt what had eluded me for so long. 6 months later, the contractions started during rehearsal. Ms. W, you okay? Destiny asked as I gripped the bar, breathing through the pain. Just practicing my breathing exercises, I managed. But Julian, who'd been painting sets with the kids, was at my side in seconds. Hospital? Now. After we finished the combination, Elena. His voice held that mix of exasperation and adoration I'd grown to love. You're in labor. The kids erupted in excitement, their voices following us to the car. Ms. W's having the baby. 14 hours later, Grace Eleanor Hartman Whitfield entered the world, screaming and perfect, and absolutely certain of her place in it. She's got your stubbornness, Julian murmured, cradling our daughter while I dozed. And your timing, I countered, right in the middle of rehearsal. The Whitfield Academy had bloomed beyond my wildest dreams. 60 students now, with a waiting list. 3 part-time instructors, a board of directors that included everyone from Destiny's mother to a former prima ballerina from New York. Richard was serving 5 to 7 years in federal prison. His company had crumbled, his society friends scattered like roaches when lights turned on. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt free. Knock, knock. Chloe peered around the door, arms full of balloons. How's our newest dancer? Loud, I said, taking Grace back from Julian. Opinionated. Definitely mine. Eleanor followed, having become an unexpected ally these past months. She'd even taught a few classes at the academy, her Boston Brahmin accent delighting the kids. The news is here, she reported. Something about Charleston's comeback story of the year. I groaned. The media attention hadn't died down, just shifted. From scandal to inspiration, they'd rewritten my narrative so many times, I'd stopped keeping track. Tell them to wait, Julian said firmly. Or better yet, tell them to leave. No. I adjusted Grace, decision settling over me. Send them in. Elena, one last time, I promised. Let's give them their ending. The reporter was young, nervous, clearly expecting the polished Princess Charleston society preferred. Instead, she got me, exhausted, glowing, utterly raw. Ms. Whitfield, this has been quite a journey. From professional dancer to public scandal to founding the city's most innovative arts program. What would you tell other women facing similar challenges? I looked at Grace, then at Julian, then through the window where I could see the harbor in the distance. That your worth isn't determined by who leaves you, but by who you become after they're gone. That falling isn't failing. It's finding out what you're made of. I shifted Grace to my shoulder. That sometimes the life you planned has to burn down completely before the life you're meant to live can grow. And now, what's next for Elena Whitfield? Whitfield Hartman, Julian corrected quietly. If she'll have me. I turned to him, stunned. He was holding another ring, not the engagement solitaire I'd expected, but a simple band with 3 stones, past, present, future. I'm not asking you to be saved, he said, obvious to the camera. I'm asking you to save me right back. Every day, forever. Julian, you said you needed to stand on your own feet first. You have. You've built something amazing. Now let me stand beside you. Not in front or behind. Beside. Grace chose that moment to projectile vomit all over my hospital gown. The reporter gasped. Eleanor laughed. And I said yes. Not the fairy tale yes of my first marriage. All desperation disguised as love. This was messier, realer. A yes with baby vomit on my shoulder and stretch marks on my belly and a business to run and a heart that had learned the difference between being rescued and being partnered. Can we quote you on that? The reporter asked, eyes wide. Quote this, I said, cleaning Grace with practiced efficiency. Life isn't a ballet. It's not about perfect lines or flawless technique. It's about showing up day after day, even when you can't hear the music anymore, especially then. 3 months later, I stood in the wings of the Charleston Gaylord Center, watching my students prepare for their first major performance. The Academy's inaugural showcase had sold out in 3 days, a mix of curiosity and genuine support filling the 1,800 seats. 5 minutes, Ms. W, called Destiny, now my assistant instructor, all of 15 and already more poised than I'd been at 20. In the audience, Julian sat with Grace, who at 3 months had already perfected the art of stealing scenes. Eleanor flanked them, along with Chloe, Maria, and dozens of parents who'd believed when no one else would. Even a few familiar faces from the old Charleston society had come. Tentative olive branches extended through purchased tickets. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer began, the Whitfield Hartman Academy of Dance presents Phoenix Rising. The lights dimmed, music swelled, and 60 children who'd been told they weren't good enough, rich enough, connected enough to dance took the stage and proved everyone wrong. They moved through pieces I'd choreographed while pregnant. Stories of resilience and joy, struggle and triumph. Professional? Not quite. Perfect? Far from it. But as I watched them dance, these kids who'd saved me, as much as I'd saved them, I understood something fundamental. We don't rise from ashes alone. We rise because someone sees us in the soot and says, I believe you can fly. We rise because love isn't just romantic, it's communal, forged in studio mirrors and hospital rooms and courthouse weddings. We rise because falling taught us that the ground isn't the end, but a place to push off from. Mama dance? Grace's babble carried from the audience, and laughter rippled through the theater. One more time, I whispered, stepping onto the stage as the music for the finale began. I danced with my students, my postpartum body, nothing like the ballet form of my youth. But it was stronger now, carved by survival rather than aesthetics. The audience rose to their feet before we'd even finished, tears and cheers mixing in a symphony of acceptance. Later, as we packed up the empty theater, Richard's mother approached. I tensed, ready for one last confrontation. I was wrong, she said simply. About you. About what strength looks like. She pressed an envelope into my hands. A donation for the scholarship fund, in Grace's name. She left before I could respond, dignity intact despite her son's disgrace. You okay? Julian asked, shifting Grace to his other arm. More than okay, I said, meaning it. Charleston's lights twinkled beyond the windows, the same city that had celebrated and shunned me in equal measure. Tomorrow, there'd be reviews to read, bills to pay, bottles to warm, and dreams to chase. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged. Not because a man had saved me or society had accepted me, but because I'd saved myself. And in doing so, I'd discovered that the most beautiful performances aren't the ones without falls. They're the ones where you turn the stumble into part of the dance. Grace gurgled, reaching for my face with chubby fingers. That's right, baby girl, I whispered. Your mama used to fly, and someday, when you're ready, I'll teach you how. But first, I'll teach you how to fall, because that's where all the best stories begin.